Hello my friends, in this video we'll be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results, predicted phenotype traits, and GED match results of an Eneolithic individual from Siberia, from Lake Baikal region in this location right here. What's interesting about this individual is that he is a male, and his Y DNA is actually N2. N2 is very closely related to N1, which is the lineage most common in Finland and Estonia, which are Northern European countries. So this person actually has some paternal relation to Northern Europeans, which is definitely very, very, very interesting. So this person lived 58 to 56 centuries before the Common Era. He lived in this location right here, next to Lake Baikal in southern Siberia. And his mitochondrial lineage, let's look up his mitochondrial lineage right now. His mitochondrial lineage is C4. His Y DNA, most precise subclade is N2 MF57 52704. Very, very interesting subclade. Now let's see what he scores with Uroginski 36. As you can see with Uroginski 36, he's scoring 56.7% Siberian, so mostly Siberian admixture. 23.23% East Central Asian, so a little bit of Kyrgyz-like admixture as well. 16.8% East Asian, so a little bit of, I guess, in this case, East Asian means like Chinese or Korean-like admixture. And then there is 2.3% Amerindian, and then there is noise admixtures, 0.4% West African, and 0.4% Oceanian. With the oracle, he is closest to Buryats, Tuvans, Buryats, Altaians, Kalmyks, and Kyrgyz. I think Kyrgyz and Kalmyks are sort of the outliers here. They are a little bit further, but Buryats make total sense. Buryats are sort of right there in Siberia, right next to this region right here. So I guess the genetics of this region haven't changed all that much. They still resemble the people who lived there in the Eneolithic, 58 centuries before the Common Era. And people who live there now sort of resemble each other quite strongly. The closest mixture is a mixture of 80% Buryat plus 19% Yakut. The second closest mixture is 82% Buryat plus 17% Yevenk. And there is also mixtures like Buryat plus Nganasan, Buryat plus Chukchi. So it looks like relative to Buryats, this person is a little bit more northern, a little bit more like Yakut or Nganasan or Chukchi, a little bit more Eskimo shifted. Definitely very interesting here. Interesting dynamic, maybe a little bit more of this Paleo Eskimo or admixture, which I think in this case, Paleo Eskimo admixture would be like a mixture of Siberian and Amerindian with Uroginski 36. Whereas Buryat would be an increase in the East Central Asian. At least that's what I think. Maybe in the comments, if you understand more about what is typical for Buryats and Yakuts and Yevenks to score with Uroginski 36, if you know what is typical for these groups to score, maybe you can leave your insights in the comments. But from what I understand, I think the reason they're scoring Buryat plus Yakut, or Buryat plus Yevenk, or Buryat plus Koryak, no, it's Khezhen plus Koryak, but there is also Buryat plus Koryak here, is because they're scoring a little bit more Siberian and a little bit more Amerindian than what's typical for Buryats. That's what I think. Or you could look at the reverse side of this coin and say that they're scoring Koryak plus Buryat because they have a little bit more of the East Central Asian admixture than what's typical for Koryaks. You could also say that, for sure. Anyway, let's look at what they score with my own ethnicity calculator. This will be very interesting to see for sure. And here they are closest to Mongol individual, Mongol DAS001, followed by Jamon from Japan, followed by Tibetan Iron Age, followed by Mongol ERD001, Mongol BGR002. So everything that is to be expected, they are closest to various Mongols, and they are actually getting modeled as a mixture of Mongol plus Chinese for the closest mixture, followed by Chinese plus Turkic for the second closest mixture, followed by Mongol plus Jomon from Japan for the third closest, and Mongol plus Mongol for the fourth closest most. So they're quite Mongol with my oracle, which is exactly what you would expect. So that's definitely quite good. Decent result. I am very satisfied. Let's see what they score for National Code Calculator results, or what this individual looks like, what his appearance is. So he definitely has dark brown eyes, 88% likelihood of dark brown eyes, absolutely 0% likelihood of blue eyes, 0% for blue eyes with amber center, 0% for green eyes, below 1% for hazel eyes, 11% for brown eyes, but really, he's got dark brown eyes, 88% likelihood for dark brown eyes. For hair color, 99% odds for black hair, so he definitely has black hair as well. For skin color likelihood distribution, he's got most likely olive or Mediterranean skin, so a little bit lighter in the pigmentation of skin. I would say that it is typical for East Asians to have light brown skin, but in his case, it looks like he most likely has olive or Mediterranean skin tone. Although there is also a 33.5% chance of light brown skin for him as well, so there is a slight chance of light brown skin too. For hair texture, it looks like he has straight hair, most likely straight hair. Wavy hair is also quite possible, but knowing his ethnicity, I would say the odds are he has straight hair. And for nose shape, he definitely has snub shaped nose. Once again, knowing his ethnicity, it's much easier to say that he has a snub shaped nose, but also the numbers, once again, 90% odds for snub shaped nose. We can pretty much say that he most likely has a snub shaped nose. Probably does not have a Greek aquiline, long, narrow nose shape. So he probably indeed has a snub shaped nose. For coloring related variants found in the file, looks like he actually has blue eye haplotype 1, which is not all that uncommon for East Asians. It's very typical to see East Asians with blue eye haplotype 1. He does not have any of the other blue eye haplotypes. No BH2, no BH3. So there is no reason to expect him to have any uh, like light color of eyes or hair. He does not have any light pigmentation variants in MC1R, so there is no reason to suspect he might have any predisposition to being ginger. All right, let's close that. And let's see the phenotype oracle for him. Let's see what phenotypes he might resemble. So the closest phenotype to him is this, which I guess looks fairly East Asian. I would say this looks quite Chinese. Maybe more Japanese, I would say. More Japanese, yeah. The second phenotype is South Chinese looking. And the third phenotype is regular Chinese looking. And for the mixture phenotypes, I'm not an expert on East Asian phenotypes. I don't interact with the East Asians too much, so I can't really tell you too much about their phenotypes. But looks like all of these mixtures are a mixture of East Asian plus East Asian, East Asian plus East Asian, East Asian plus East. This is like exotic East Asian. This is, I think, more of a Southeast Asian, maybe South Chinese, maybe like Vietnamese or something, Thai or something. I don't know. This is more of a exotic looking East Asian, more than this or this, because I feel like this is like typical Chinese or maybe Korean face, whereas this is more of a something exotic going on here. But let's close that. All right, let's see the biomarkers panel. Let's see what biomarkers predispositions this individual has. And for the biomarkers, looks like he has a predisposition to higher than average level of vitamin D, which is really good. He has higher level of LDL cholesterol, which is unfortunate. Below average level of HDL cholesterol, which is really bad. But it's not that bad. It's actually pretty much within the average level, so that's pretty good. He has below average level of glucose, which is good. He has average level of hemoglobin. He has high blood pressure, which is predisposition to high blood pressure is kind of unfortunate. He has low level of iron in the blood, so definitely doesn't have any hemochromatosis variants, which is really good to see. He has below average level of sex hormone binding globulin in blood, which is pretty good to see. He has below average level of red blood cell count in blood. He has below average number of base pairs for the telomere length, which is kind of bad. So slightly shorter lifespan, at least biological lifespan, and below average for height. So, well, these Siberian people are quite short in general. It's a stereotype. Where I'm from in Russia, maybe you didn't know about this about me, but I'm actually from Russia. I was born and I sort of grew up until I was 11 in Russia. I'm from an ethnic minority region in Russia, and these people who live there have a very significant amount of Siberian admixture from people like this individual. So these people with the minority, these minorities, they are much different looking from Russians, from white people like me. So the way you can tell apart the white people from the minorities is that the minorities are much shorter. They're much well, of course, they're much darker in color, but they're also much shorter. And in the Mari people, where I'm from, the Republic of Mario, they're a lot darker in eye color, hair color, more so eye color, but they're also a lot shorter in stature. So it is no surprise to me. In this case, it is no surprise to me that this individual is predisposed to being shorter. In fact, I think that 1 centimeter below average is even an understatement. I wouldn't be surprised if this person was like, I don't know, 5'5". Let's close that. Let's look at the polygenic risk scores, and let's see what he scores for these. So it looks like he has below average dose of kidney stones, which is really good. Above average dose for hemoglobin E disease. Yeah, these Siberians, they're pretty short people. It's pretty cool. They're kind of like these like mythical creatures. I don't know. I don't want to sound, that sounds super racist, but I don't know. They're pretty short. He has average odds for migraine. Yeah, really high odds for hemoglobin E disease. That's really interesting. He's got average odds for lupus. He's got high odds for gout. He's got below average odds for thyroid cancer. He's got below average odds for eczema. He's got very high odds for exfoliation glaucoma. Let's look that up actually. Let's go ahead and look that up in the file and see what he scores for that. So he's got a genotype for much higher odds of glaucoma, which explains the score here. Yep, that totally explains the score. He's got a genotype for he's got average odds of pigmentary glaucoma. He's got average odds for everything else relating to glaucoma. He's got below average odds for polycystic ovary syndrome, which is good. Below average odds for cataracts. Very high odds for age-related macular degeneration. So let's look that up. Let's look up age-related macular degeneration. Let's look that up in the file. So it looks like he's got. This is a bad genotype. This leads to higher odds. This is typical genotype. This leads to typical odds. This leads to a very increased odds for that. This is a good genotype. This leads to decreased odds. This leads to higher odds. This leads to higher odds, and this leads to higher odds as well. So yep, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes total sense why he's scoring the way he is for the odds of AMD. Looks like he's got average odds for rheumatoid arthritis, below average odds for Tourette's, higher than average odds for epilepsy, average odds for asthma, above average odds for leukemia, above average odds for vitiligo, above average odds for myopia, below average odds for corneal astigmatism, really good. High odds for primary biliary cirrhosis, and there's a bunch of risk variants here. So he definitely has some risk variants for primary biliary cirrhosis, some predisposition to that condition. Looks like he has below averages for stroke, which is really good to see. Below averages for male pattern hair loss, so he's quite protected from male pattern hair loss. Actually, let's look that up. Let's look up male pattern hair loss in his result. He does not have the variant in AR gene that protects from male pattern hair loss, which is kind of unfortunate. So he doesn't have the sub-Saharan African variant that protects from baldness, but it looks like he still has below average odds for that, which is kind of typical for East Asians, and he is East Eurasian in ancestry. East Eurasians tend to score below average for this, so that's pretty typical. He has below average odds for atrial fibrillation. Okay. He has average odds for deep vein thrombosis. He has above average odds for unipolar depression. All right. He has very high odds for bipolar type 1, and he has very high odds for schizophrenia. And he has average odds for type 2 diabetes, and he has average odds for type 1 diabetes, and he has below average odds for Alzheimer's, and he has very low odds for multiple sclerosis. Very good. So he's definitely quite protected from multiple sclerosis. For breast cancer, 2 risk variants out of 24, really good. For testicular cancer, 10 risk variants out of 24. Looks like he's got only 1 risk variant in the important variants in keto G, so he's actually quite protected from testicular cancer. Definitely really good here. Celiac disease section, 3 risk variants out of 10, typical. No risk variants for GSS, Crohn's disease, 8 risk variants, but none of them are marked as important, so we can disregard that. No risk variants for Riefenstein's, no Parkinson's. 2 risk variants for Gilbert syndrome, but they are quite. Actually, I did not label them as common, so they might be uncommon. That might be concerning a little bit. For basal cell carcinoma, no risk variants. For Peter-Jeggers, no risk variants. Hypoplasia, no risk variants. Jacob Creutzfeldt, 2 common risk variants. Wardenberg, no risk variants. Allergies, 11 risk variants out of 26, which is typical. For familiar hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, no risk variants. For irritable bowel syndrome, 2 risk variants, which is typical. They're common risk variants. For everything else, looks like nothing uncommon. Nothing uncommon except for this for Lee-Fraumeni and this for familiar thoracic or aortic aneurysm and this for Hirschsprung disease. But all 3 of these I feel like are miscalls. I feel like all 3 of these genotypes, maybe at least 2 out of 3 of these, are miscalls. So I wouldn't be too concerned about these. So in my opinion, this is due to the quality of the file and not due to reality. So I don't really trust these 3 genotypes too much, to be honest. So let's close that. And let's go ahead and see what this individual scores for the monogenic traits, and we'll be done there. So it looks like he has, for the warrior versus warrior traits, it looks like he has a predisposition to warrior phenotype. So slower dopamine reuptake and higher dopamine levels, lower stress resiliency. Definitely quite atypical phenotype for a East Eurasian. East Eurasians tend to be warriors, but it looks like for him, he has a very slight predisposition to being a warrior. So it's 34 versus 31%. So it's a very slight predisposition, but still slight predisposition to being a warrior. A very European trait for him. So a little bit more dopamine accumulation, lower activity of the COMT and MAOA enzymes. For dopamine D2, it looks like he has higher activity of the dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain, higher activity of D2 dopamine receptors. So some predisposition to some such conditions as bipolar and schizophrenia, and we've seen that in his report that he has predisposition to bipolar and schizophrenia. Well, not like a crazy predisposition, but slight predisposition to these conditions. For 5-HT and serotonin, it looks like he has a predisposition to intermediate levels of 5-HT and serotonin, so intermediate predisposition to such conditions as anxiety and depression. No risk variance for dwarfism, and this I'm not going to talk about. For autism, he has a predisposition to intermediate odds of autism. Definitely really good. So no incredible predisposition to higher or lower odds of autism for him. For OXTR and empathy gene, he's actually got a predisposition to higher level of empathy, which is very interesting. What's typically for East Asians, you will see a predisposition to a lower level of empathy in OXTR. But in this case, I guess we see an example of East Asian with a predisposition to a higher level of empathy, which is definitely very interesting and unusual. So, based on his genotype in OXTR, he's a little bit predisposed to a higher level of empathy. Definitely very cool. Looks like he does not carry the European lactose persistence mutation, and he is also. However, he does have one derived variant. That's crazy. Okay, this is actually crazy. He has one derived variant for European lactose persistence and is likely not lactose intolerant in this variation. This is completely crazy. I don't understand how this happened. How does this individual have this allele in this variation right here? I don't understand. So he actually somehow carries one of the variant for European lactose persistence mutation, and he's not even a European whatsoever. So that's completely crazy. This might be a miscall, but leave your thoughts in the comments. How do you think he has the variant for European lactose persistence if he's not even remotely a European and he doesn't have any European in his ancestry whatsoever? Because I don't know. I have no clue. Definitely write in the comments. I'm inclined to think it's a miscall and a problem with the file, but I do want to see your input. Okay. Hemochromatosis, no risk variance for hemochromatosis. Alzheimer's, we see no risk variance in APOE, which is really good. Multiple sclerosis, no risk variance in the HLA gene. For cardiovascular disease panel, looks like he has a predisposition to intermediate odds of cardiovascular issues, which is really good. So no incredible predisposition to higher or lower odds of cardiovascular issues, which is really good. For facial morphology panel, looks like he has all the East Asian genotypes in EZAR, extremely East Asian genotype in EZAR, homozygous for all the East Asian variants in EZAR. Definitely very East Asian and facial morphology. He has a genotype for longer mid-face length. He has a genotype for decreased odds of protruding nasal bridge and more upturned nose. He has a genotype for nose drooping down based on GCHS2. He has a genotype for lower odds of missing teeth. He has a genotype for thicker eyebrows and a genotype for intermediate eyebrow thickness. He also has a genotype for smaller nose size, which is definitely very interesting. When it comes to micropenis, he does not have the variants for micropenis, which is really good to see. No fat gene variants in FTOs. RS99609 does not have photic sneeze reflex, and also he has. Okay, wait a second. Risk of heart failure due to beta blocker medications is slightly below average, which is really good to see. Let's see what else can we talk about here. He's got slightly increased odds of cannabis-induced psychosis based on his genotype in ACT1. No risk variance of pain hypersensitivity out of 10 total, so he's not predisposed to pain hypersensitivity. That's when you're extremely oversensitive to pain. Definitely quite good. Doesn't have those predispositions based on genotype in SCN9A. He's got one risk variant for familiar Mediterranean fever, which is really unusual because he's not a Mediterranean whatsoever. So he's actually carrying a risk variant for familiar, let me quote, Mediterranean fever. And he is a Siberian from the Lake Baikal, which is really, really far from the Mediterranean. But nonetheless, he carries a risk variant for that. Definitely quite cool. For alcoholism, his risk score is significantly above average, so he's definitely quite predisposed to alcohol addiction. MTHFR panel, let's look at that. So this genotype, definitely really good, so really healthy, normal homocysteine levels. This genotype, definitely really bad, so this genotype leads to impaired folate metabolism and various risks of various conditions. And this genotype leads to much lower blood pressure, which I'm not really sure how that affects the folate metabolism and homocysteine levels. This, I know, this leads to much higher homocysteine levels. So we're going to look at the homocysteine panel and we're going to see how that affects the homocysteine panel in a couple minutes. For leukemia panel, looks like no variants for leukemia and leukemia in NQ01. Really good. Rare diseases and traits panel. Let's look at that. So does he have any rare diseases and traits? Rare diseases, rare conditions. He's a carrier of two risk alleles for neural tube defects and spina bifida. Very interesting. Does he have any other rare variants that he's carrying? Let's see. He's got heterozygous genotype here, which leads to slightly increased risk of several autoimmune diseases, including Addison's disease. He's got this genotype, which leads to decreased DOA activity and negative response to non-steroid anti-pain medications. This is an uncommon genotype, but aside from this, I am not seeing any other predisposition to any rare conditions. He has this genotype, which leads to one risk variant for endometriosis, but aside from this, I'm not seeing any rare conditions that he's carrying. So it looks like he's not predisposed to any rare conditions. Pretty good. For APOB gene panel, he's got 4 APOB risk variants for familiar hypercholesteremia out of 14 total, which is kind of bad. It's kind of high, but it's still sort of okay. All right. Celiac disease panel, no risk variants in the HLA gene, which is really good to see. Androgen receptor panel, no Riefenstein, no androgen sensitivity, really good to see. Crohn's disease panel, no risk variants for Crohn's in the important variants here. Canavan syndrome, no risk variants for Canavan syndrome. HIV and AIDS panel, no protective variants from HIV. For HLA gene panel, it looks like he's got lower odds of autoimmune disease for the highest percentage, so he's definitely quite protected from autoimmune disease, but he's still scoring very, very high for the highest odds of autoimmune disease, and 19% is high. So let's actually look up HLA in his file and find out what I missed. What did I miss? So here he's got type 1 diabetes, very unlikely. All right. He's got no risk variants here, which is good. He's got 2 risk variants. Okay, he's got 2 risk variants for in HLA in this variation in vitiligo panel, which did contribute to the score. Okay, I missed this. Yes, so he's homozygous for the HLA-DQ8 haplotype, highest risk for celiac disease. I missed this. So because of this, this also plays a big role in the calculation. Because of this, together with the vitiligo panel, that definitely played a big role in him scoring 19% for the risk score. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, that makes total sense. I understand now. All right. For the MTRR gene panel, it looks like he's got two risk variants for disorders of intracellular colon metabolism here, and no risk variants anywhere else. For CBS panel and homocystinuria, looks like he's got predisposition to intermediate homocysteine levels, so overall pretty good. So he definitely doesn't have those elevated homocysteine levels. So it looks like this variant in MTHFR, it's easier for me to look it up than scroll up. So it looks like this variant in MTHFR that caused a number of risk elevated associated with impaired fluid metabolism, such as cancer, cleft lip dementia, arthritis, heart disease risk. It looks like this variant did not really ruin his result too much. He's still scoring intermediate for homocysteine levels, which is really good. Okay, so for muscular dystrophy myopathies, looks like he's got no risk variance for that. No risk variance for ADL either. For color blindness panel, no risk variance for color blindness, so he's probably not colorblind. For FTO gene panel, looks like he's got no risk variance for obesity, no fat gene variants anywhere. Definitely very protected from obesity. Very, very good. And some genotypes for lower BMI as well. Definitely really good here. So he's quite protected from obesity. For syncope panel, based on 7 SNPs, he's got lower than average odds for syncope. And for biotraits panel, let's try to. I'm just gonna go through some of these, not through all of them. Looks like he's got dry earwax, no body odor, likely East Asian ancestry, and reduced colostrum. So this leads to drier earwax and reduced body odor. Definitely very good genotype to have. I would rather have drier earwax and reduced body odor. That would be really cool to have. Less need of, I guess, deodorant. But he's got 2 copies of the hunter-gatherer TCL1 gene variant, which leads to reduced ability to process carbs and sugars. I think these people did practice hunting and gathering rather than farming, so that would come in handy. Um, he's got a genotype that leads to 2 times increased early heart attack risk, less weight gain on high-fat diets, which is definitely quite interesting. And let's scroll past all of this. He's got a genotype for lower ascorbic acid free sulfate levels. He's got the genotype for lower levels of vitamin E, genotype for higher levels of vitamin K, also another genotype for higher levels of vitamin K, genotype for lower levels of vitamin A, genotype for higher levels of vitamin C. So this is all vitamins. Like, I don't want to really go over this, to be honest. It's not that interesting. And for blood group panel, it looks like his blood type is most likely type O. The most common blood type is his blood type. He probably has blood type O. Blood type A is also quite possible at 24% likelihood, but he most likely has blood type O at 76% likelihood. And type B and type AB is pretty much out of the picture. So he definitely has blood type O, as we can see here. Well, this was my coverage of the sample of DA247 Baikal Eneolithic sample from Siberia. I definitely hope this was entertaining for you to watch and you enjoyed it. Definitely leave a like if you enjoyed it. Comment your suggestions for next videos, or maybe comment what you found interesting from this video. And also, I want to remind you that you can buy my trait predictor, the executable that I use to generate these reports, these ethnicity reports, ethnicity, traits, phenotype, everything that you see in this video, like all of this. And there's actually a little bit more. There's actually also this OCA2 and HERC2 eye color calculator results. There's a little bit more that you don't see. There's stuff I don't talk about that is also on here. But you can see all of this stuff. You can generate a report like this with my trade predictor, with my executable, and you can buy that for $25 from link, which is in the description of the video. So check out the description. The description also has the link to purchase a report for only $4. So you just upload your file to me, and I send you your report. That's going to cost $4. And if you wanna run 2 files, so if you have 2 files that you want to run through my tool, then you upload 2 files to me, and that's gonna cost you $7. So that's really cheap. I don't think there's any other place online that does services at this type of price. So definitely check out the description of this video, and also the file that I was analyzing in this video. The actual DNA file for this sample will be in the description as well. So make sure you read the description and